Welcome to my PowerPoint presentation entitled The Eye of the Beholder. It is a visual explanation of my art installation, which hopes to visually add to the diverse ethnographic fieldwork exploring female autonomy and gender expectations. The focus of this visual research determines the benefits made available to me as a female when I comply with patriarchy. In recent years, there has been an increased interest in dismantling internalized sexism. Florence Given even recognizes that some feminists are afraid to admit they possess the imposed fragility that women have fought for centuries to overcome, while still acknowledging women do not exist to satisfy the male gaze. Within these discussions, women are often referred to as traumatized victims who become agents of patriarchy in efforts to gain reconciliation with their own trauma, according to Futala. However, Futala also recognizes that all women harbor and perform sexism. At the same time, she highlights the importance of female solidarity when attempting to dismantle female misogyny. If I acknowledge my patriarchal compliance via gender expectations, should I be excluded from feminist discourse? The sculpture supports my argument that my female chooses to exploit the benefits of adhering to patriarchal norms as a woman. If, as de Beauvoir states, one becomes a woman, whose definition of woman is one becoming? My name is Natasha. I am a 50-year-old student, mother and daughter, sister, artist, boxer, aspiring Vaishnava, woman, female, disabled, human. I grew up in the north of England in the third wave of feminism in the 1970s, 80s and 90s. Gender roles of what a woman should and should not be and what a man's man ought to look like were clearly defined. No one ever taught me what a woman's woman looked like. What frustrated me enough to research gender performativity as an adult was the realization that the biology of my body does not determine my gender. If I fail to adhere to the gender expectations of what is defined as a woman within my culture, I am considered manly. Note that my culture in this dissertation refers to Eurocentric culture. Attempts to swap gender masks or add a new one is within mainstream culture akin to a clown trying to wear someone else's mask. The derision serves to ostracize the non-compliant, providing a convenient scapegoat for the frustrated. The sculpture I have created is a visual representation of the critical questions I have asked myself with regards to female patriarchy and my sometimes willing compliance. I have experimented with mixed media to demonstrate from an anthropological perspective why women choose to comply, sometimes willingly becoming advocates of patriarchy. On this slide, there is a link to my YouTube video. The video contains an exhibition of my visual autoethnography in the form of an art installation. When I have finished speaking on this slide, please click the link. It is important that you watch this before proceeding in order for the rest of the presentation to make sense. When I began my dissertation, I intended to identify patriarchal women and the females embracing their gender performance. The advocation or normalization of patriarchy has already begun when we perform our role as woman. This role may need adapting to remain in accordance with each cultural definition. For example, some cultures revere men and women who are larger in size, whilst other cultures define slender women and men as desirable. I intended to expose patriarchal women and what I arrogantly regarded as their treachery to progressive feminism. I am aware that I also perform my gender. I am prepared to watch my weight and make an effort for the right man. My behavioural changes when personally engaging with patriarchy are addressed within each category. Immanuel Kant acknowledges that both men and women can be objectified, but accepts that women are the main victims of objectification. However, he blames women, such as prostitutes, for allowing it to happen. Kant states that the prostitute's commodification necessarily leads to her objectification. She is reduced to a thing. Human beings are not entitled to offer themselves for profit as things for the use of others in the satisfaction of their sexual inclinations. Kant's lectures indirectly blame the prostitute for surrendering her humanity to become an object. Kant fails to recognize the limited existence of a woman within male-dominated power structures. Women cannot choose whether they are objectified. The objectification happens regardless of her choice. However, she is in control of how she chooses to profit from an unjust system, proving her autonomy beyond gender expectations. I am intrigued as to whether my performance is coerced by the man's gaze, so I have produced a visual account of my female gaze running parallel to the woman's gaze that embraces patriarchy. My autoethnographic account details the multitude of influences directing my gaze as a patriarchal woman, female, and human. My research aims to understand and evaluate why I consciously or subconsciously embrace ruling cultural versions of gender whilst attempting to refute gender constructs. A sculpture using mixed media has been created with the intention of demonstrating that the woman gazing is directed by external influences within a patriarchal power structure. However, my gazing female determines my choice of influence in accordance with my personal truths and lived experiences. My human looks beyond gender roles and patriarchy towards a possibility of new materialist solutions. The main objective is to identify, if possible, my patriarchal princess running symbiotically with my genderless human gaze. Please click on the link below and watch the video before proceeding. The plaster base and object cemented within it represents what is solid and fixed, such as my humanness and the laws of nature. It contains immovable plaster cast hands that are part and parcel of nature. They are female hands because I am searching for my natural female. Butler acknowledges the inevitable external influences that define gender, but she denies there is a genderless original that I am searching for, that chooses daily which gender to perform. The way in which each hand has been decorated reveals the complicated impact of outside influences and my positive and negative responses to those impacts. I am attempting the problematic task of separating the woman's or man's gaze from the female gaze and the female gaze from the human gaze with a view to progressing beyond human-centric definitions. I have arranged the slides in order of influence, starting with the least influential to the greatest director of my gaze. Is it capitalist society's definition of sex and gender that determines the direction of my gaze? Is the CEO of my human gaze a patriarch? The suspended hands have been decorated to reflect the impact environmental and societal influences have on my gaze as a woman. The hands represent my female self processing and experiencing patriarchy in different settings. How do these categories increase or decrease my patriarchy, and for what purpose? Little fingers raised on the fixed hands denotes the vulnerability acquired when rejecting social constructs. It is also a nod to my evil gender genius that successfully maneuvers around a system that does not serve me. However, if I willingly perform my gender, I gain access to positions reserved for dominant genders and the privileges assigned to them. I am beginning with friends because they have the least influence on my gaze. I choose friends that embrace the individual gaze. The fixed hand depicts the Friends logo from the American television sitcom Friends, and a man smoking marijuana. When I have no desire to perform my gender, I go rogue female. by associating with subcultures that do not adhere to gender norms. I have spoken my truth many times, much to the dismay of most crowds. My truth nuggets often result in expulsion from the group or friendship. I see the social etiquette, but do not wish to perform as a woman on a regular basis. There's so much to remember, especially in the company of male friends. I am unsure how to perform as a female or human socially. If I just do female me or human me, I'm too loud, too bold, too flirty, too bossy, too vain, and very rude. All great fun, but occasionally incredibly lonely. So occasionally I trade a little gender performance for company, like a busker with a hat catching company instead of coins. The suspended hand represents virtual friendships. I rarely use social media. I don't like the disintegration of empathy that has come with 1-minute TikTok clips, and I have never made any meaningful friendships on social media. I make a huge effort to keep the virtual beholder and its algorithms from my gaze. I have chosen to use the term culture to refer to national culture. As an aspiring Vaishnava, I have a very complicated relationship with culture. I am part of a religious community that embraces Indian and UK rural cultural traditions, as opposed to the ethical practices outlined in ancient Hindu scriptures. In rural UK, at Vaishnava gatherings, women with long hair who choose not to wear it tied up are seen as signalling seductively to the men like a siren. However, in the London temple, female hair is not an issue. If a sadhu or greater teacher comes to a rural town and the only way I can access their knowledge is via a patriarchal host, I will ensure my hair is up and my petticoat and sari are on. I want access to the knowledge more than I want to challenge gender expectations and cultural traditions in rural West Wales. The suspended hand displays all that is traditionally British. For me, British culture belongs to my father. He is the Sun newspaper reader, Rule Britannia flag waver, and all-round white patriarchal soldier. Having lived and worked in European bars and clubs, I usually interpret British culture as drunken snobbery. Heartwarming British nostalgia, for me, is my nana's lovely Sunday dinners. My British culture has permitted me more freedoms in terms of gender performativity. The consequences of too bold, too flirty, and too rude have greater consequences for me in Indian culture. I am a bisexual cis female. As a child, I would disguise myself as a cis male by putting tennis balls down my trousers. I imagined I would be safer as a boy. Unfortunately, I wasted 30 years of my life identifying as heterosexual. In the 1980s, there was very little support for the LGBTQ community, and I was simply not brave enough to challenge the heteronormative narrative. I chose instead to have secret sexual encounters in fear of retribution from patriarchy. My sexuality has been one of the most difficult gazes to own and direct, because my worth as a woman, not as a female, is very much dependent upon my desirability to heterosexual cis males. The fixed hand is painted in the colours of the bisexual flag, and the suspended hand is painted in the colours of the heterosexual flag. The heterosexual flag, for me, has always belonged to cis males. Entering relationships with other females often liberates me from many gender expectations that come with the hetero relationships. This validation of my individuality as a human is worth the violence and rejection I sometimes receive from the heterosexual community. As a menopausal female, I am currently identifying as temporarily asexual, hence the emerging white fingertip. As a woman, I identify as bisexual. As a female, I identify as asexual. As a human, I identify as maverick. The fixed hand represents the rural environment that I currently live in. The suspended hand represents the urban environments I have lived in most of my life. Urban environments kept my focus on money and appearances. Making money was important if I was to escape the rat race and move back to a rural setting. My female gaze was completely distracted by my appearance. It is important to signal to others visually who your community is in the city, to avoid the vulnerability of standing alone, like a cheetah with a broken leg. As a female living in a rural town, I feel much safer. Most faces are familiar, and people that breach the moral code or rural ethics are driven out of the community. People's relationship with nature is more symbiotic. Whilst patriarchal traditions are upheld and the gaze of women is mostly directed by men and their desirability, females appear to have a stronger bond. I feel connected to nature, and my gaze is more positive and within my grasp, whereas urban environments have a negative impact on my gaze. I feel no sense of belonging, and the urge to perform my gender is greater, perhaps as a way of coping with the excessive stimulation. The fixed hand represents my poverty, and the suspended thumb is symbolic of my financial success. I have been homeless, sleeping rough on the streets, and I have successfully managed my own business, earning hundreds of pounds daily. When I was contributing to the economy, I felt I was a useful, important member of society. I wore makeup and high heels every day, while surrendering my gaze to economic progress and the capitalist power structure it belongs to. Some of the characters behind my grease paint resented the public self-policing of my female self, but relished spoiling my daughter and the financial autonomy it gave me as a woman and single mother. I've been homeless twice in my life, before and after my daughter was born. Homelessness prior to motherhood was surprisingly liberating. I was axed from the patriarchal gaze, deemed too animalistic to participate. I never had to wear my grease paint. I used my human gaze 90% of the time. The white feather represents this sense of freedom and belonging to myself and not to society. My desirability plummeted, but I did not care about my status in a system I was now free to loathe. My second period of homelessness was with my then 2-year-old daughter, Hannah. This is represented by the mother and daughter image. We lived in a woman's refuge after experiencing violence when I refused to act like a woman and shut up. The homeless label brought great shame, and I cared that the system regarded me as a bad mother because I could not provide a home and did not want a husband. I lived in fear that patriarchs would take my daughter away if I did not correctly perform my duties according to gender expectations, as we have witnessed in the past with the Green and Commons Women's Peace Camp and the suffragette movement. On a subconscious level, patriarchy was my parental guide. My daughter later divulged as an adult that she was happier when we had nothing because I gave her quality time. When I was a willing patriarch, fully engaging with the capitalist system, I gave her restaurants, toys, and phone calls. The fixed hand is painted black as a symbol of strength. The knuckles are painted as if raw and bloody from fighting. The word Nan is written down the side of the little finger, because both my Nans gave me unconditional love as a child, and I allowed them to direct my gaze as a female and human regularly. I have written blah 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 across the fixed hand several times because the rest of my family have only conditional love and silence to offer my revelations of paedophilia within the family. I am regarded as a good woman if I faithfully supply the family glue. If I agree to let them direct my gaze and decide my truth, I am accepted as a woman and family member. The suspended thumb represents my expulsion from the family table and their demand for silence. I am now a family clown, serving as a warning to other unruly women. 20 years have passed and their influence on my gaze is decreasing. However, because patriarchy is in the driving seat of my woman's gaze, they do still hold some power here. I have chosen to use the Sunday Sport newspaper to represent the media. I have decorated the fixed and suspended hands with images and articles from the same issue. I decorated them the same way because I found it too difficult to separate my female and human from the media. They are frustratingly intertwined and wrapped around my humanness like a hungry vine on a tree trunk. I chose the Sunday Sport because it is written by and aimed at white heterosexual men. The gender roles and privileges for men are very clearly defined. As a girl, I quickly realised that desirability was a powerful tool for a female. I have since used the media to inform me of what is deemed desirable, and more importantly, what is expected of my female role as a woman, and what is expected of a male performing his gender as a man. Since puberty, I have attempted to ensure I stay thin, because in Eurocentric cultures, slender bodies are womanly and give females more desirability to men. According to mainstream media, undesirable women are generally fat and invisible. Over 80% of the Sunday Sports article relate to fully clothed men and their heroic sporting achievements or strong political views and financial investments. All the women in this paper are naked. The articles in connection with women are all related to sexual gratification and gender violence. With 3/4 of all suicides being male, I do not believe males are any more eager to play the predatory leading man than females are to play his co-starring willing victim. The media plays an intrinsic part in shaping the ethical practice and social order of the power structure it serves. Does the media reflect us, or do we reflect the media? I choose to allow the media to shape my femaleness, and I do this because I am aware of the media's power, and I am unaware of where the media ends and I begin. Performative constraints do not set the performative limits, they impel and sustain those performative constraints. Neither of these hands are suspended, both are on the ground. One has no power over the other. Neither man nor woman can win the gender wars. They are handcuffed together, doomed to act alongside one another in their chosen soap opera. The thumb belongs to the woman and the little finger belongs to the man. When these roles are performed to patriarchal perfection, the man becomes infantilized, privately relying on woman to take care of his personal needs. A little boy dressed as a ringmaster represents this. The woman becomes infantilized when offering public submission to her protector and provider of shelter and food, whilst privately controlling his day-to-day affairs. I have represented this on the thumb with a picture of a fierce ringmistress. The man's hand depicts a solitary stag and a muscle-bound man. The woman's hand depicts an angry girl. Gender roles for women dictate that a woman's rage is futile, harmless, or ugly. There is also a mother hen and her chicks quaintly painted, as motherhood is another cliché expectation placed upon women. Although I am sometimes brutally self-aware of my gender performance, my relationship with gender expectations placed upon me is an abusive one. However, I no longer feel less female if I fail to perform as a woman within the eyes of patriarchy. I also realize that the perks and power that come with fulfilling those expectations will disappear. The key to the handcuffs is placed on top of the thumbs representing the media. I am a practicing Vaishnava, which is considered to be a branch of Hinduism. My faith is extremely important to my physical and mental well-being. I cannot explain in words why I have faith in Guru, but it works for me, so I allow him access to my gaze. When I view the world through Guru's gaze, I am a natural new materialist that embraces every living creation as my equal. I am no longer woman, female, or human. I am a soul mixing and intertwining with other souls. The fixed hand represents the goddess Radha. It is painted yellow because she is said to be golden in colour. Vaishnavas accept Radha as the topmost position, believing we can only please God if we first please the goddess. On the back of the hand, I have written Krishna's name in Sanskrit. The suspended hand represents Lord Krishna. His complexion is blue, so it is painted blue. He is the god of the Vaishnavas, and on the back of this hand Radha's name is written in Sanskrit. They are accepted as two bodies with one soul. Vaishnavas believe that all souls are female when they are liberated from the material body and return to their spiritual abode. My devotional practice is in complete contrast to my academic practice. My faith has given me a deeper connection to my humanless essence. With this non-human-centric connection came a sense of purpose and belonging. The more I surrender my gaze to my Guru's direction, the more peaceful I am becoming. I sometimes allow my Guru to direct my gaze because the love I receive from him is as unconditional as my departed grandmother's. In his company, I deliberately turn on the feminine charm to please him. He does not ask me to be a good woman, but I am conditioned to please men in certain ways. Forgetting that renunciates do not identify with bodily concepts, I try to portray a good woman to him, much to his amusement and disinterest. It is I that expects this performance, not Guru. The reasons for this are as follows. The cultural gender norms that are enforced in Guru's absence in my community send confusing messages to my gaze. I am forced to navigate these current patriarchal gender expectations. I deliver my patriarchal performance when I need to gain access to the group, if the host is patriarchal. The greatest influence on my gaze are my body's limitations. My disability is central to all my public roles, so they are placed in the centre of the visual ethnography. I have an AVM in the centre of my brain. It gives me over 90% chance of an artery bursting at any given moment. I also have epilepsy. Every seizure agitates my AVM, inducing bouts of depression and agoraphobia. For the safety of not just my health, but my life, I am in the process of putting my patriarchal ring mistress to bed. I cannot afford to regularly engage in patriarchy. It is too overwhelming and very physically tiring. I am making an autonomous decision to nurture my humanless essence, or soul as I call it. My soul has no pain attached to it. My soul is genderless and free. The constant physical pains I feel in my head dictate what I can interact with. Some days I can only view black and white images. Some days I have slurred speech. Some days I am disorientated and unable to walk. All these things can make life scary, but the body becomes very resilient. I have painted this hand realistically because this is the character behind my grease paint. Genderless, sexless, but definitely human. Disability has taken the driving seat of my human gaze, and this was not my choice. The little finger is missing and raw, symbolizing what I have lost physically. Being part of the disabled community has to some extent diluted my gender, because different expectations were thrust upon me after my diagnosis and daily seizures. My dress code, food preparation, and hygiene have changed. I have spent long periods completely housebound. My disability highlights the futility of my public performance. The suspended thumb is fully formed and painted to look realistic. This is symbolic of my able-bodied past self haunting me and the able-bodied narrative I am continually presented with. If I am not even a normal human being, how can I be a normal woman? The red laces represent my weakened arteries, and I have connected them to the areas they influence the most. I have framed pictures of Frida Kahlo and the Guerrilla Girls as representations of the creativity in my life directing my human gaze. The artist within me is genderless and sexless. The picture is separate and movable because I believe creative energy is already in existence, and some of us have the determination or good fortune to access it. For me, it is ethereal. I use it to escape my patriarchal self and embrace my humanless essence and female form. I created a canopy from a wooden trellis covered in dead and fresh flowers containing plaster cast moulds of human brain, eyeball and tiny newborn human. It is a salute to Donna Haraway's plea to make kin, not babies. Metal poles are woven with fake flowers that integrate with the real ones on top. This is symbolic of the current transition to the non-human-centric future we are beginning to witness. Dead flowers are covered in living flowers. Karen Barrett's thesis that materiality and matter are always entangled with the other indicates how some new materialist feminist theorists are working towards removing binary identities, pushing us beyond the human gaze. The development of this direction serves well the deconstruction of gender performative expectations and the hegemony of sight serving our senses. Gender deconstruction would assist the demise of our obsession with using patriarchal definitions of beauty to freeze the flux of nature. Using outside influences as a rough guide, I have attempted to deconstruct the gender role I have fashioned for myself. The web of gender is so delicately woven into our human tapestry that it is almost impossible to distinguish what I am filtering and what is filtering me. I have identified that what is often referred to as the female gaze is in fact the woman's gaze. As gender is a patriarchal social construct within a male-dominated capitalist society, the woman's gaze is automatically patriarchal, as is the man's gaze. The male and female gaze is the human gaze, and the human gaze is yet to be established, let alone the panoptic gaze of the new materialists. I set out to explore Butler's theory that a genderless original does not exist. I hope to distinguish my genderless original from my evil gender genius. The visual autoethnography supports her thesis. I do have a genderless original, but it is extremely intertwined with my performance, so I cannot separate them. An artist may have all the colours on their palette, but when they all mix together, the only colour present is brown, and they cannot be separated. Women are not willing traitors. They are navigating their way through a patriarchal power structure, searching for the best way to survive without compromise. Refusing complicity within the superior caste would mean renouncing all the advantages an alliance creates. Berger highlights the problematic task of unravelling the man's and woman's gaze as two separate identities, suggesting that women survey their own femininity like men, claiming this unequal relationship between men and women within the boundaries of gender expectations is so deeply embedded in the patriarchal culture that it continues to structure female consciousness. I have realised that I am not a progressive feminist fighting against patriarchy. I am, in fact, an aspiring feminist and willing patriarch. In conclusion, the woman's and man's gaze are essentially two sides of the same socially constructed coin. If I am to retain my humanness or transcend beyond it, I am forced to renounce my patriarchal princess and all of her perks. I am not entirely sure this is possible. I do not want to participate in patriarchy anymore, and I have very little urge left to placate men's desires. I have lost my desire to be woman king, but I am happily autonomous in my decision-making and grateful for the small changes gender removal is having. I am still choosing how much to adapt, but a woman must first assess her own success and survival rate within the system of which she is part of. As a woman, I fully acknowledge the consequences of rejecting a system intrinsic to patriarchal social order. It is futile to stand alone and difficult to inspire other women to join you in your expulsion and clown status. This personal exploration of what is expected of my gender and the patriarchal directions I deliberately choose to navigate my way around has unexpectedly revealed, in this case, that I am the one that requests these expectations. It is what I expect to happen. The spoils of the gender wars are divided amongst the compliant, regardless of gender identity. Thank you for taking the time to view this PowerPoint presentation and the video link.